London was drowning in rain that night. The storm did not simply fall from the sky. It assaulted the city with relentless force, sheets of water lashing against the glass walls of a high-rise tower. Wind howled between steel and concrete, turning the streets far below into blurred rivers of light. Thunder rolled distantly, a low, constant threat, while the rain drummed against the windows like impatient fingers demanding to be let inside. Inside the tower, far above the sleeping city, a luxurious office glowed with artificial light. Polished wood, leather, and glass reflected the sterile brightness of multiple screens. A computer hummed with quiet aggression, its fans straining under endless processing, while furious typing shattered the stillness. The sound was sharp, erratic, almost desperate, echoing off walls designed to impress rather than comfort. Alistair Graves finally stopped typing. A heavy sigh tore out of his chest, as if dragged up from somewhere deep and exhausted. He leaned back and rubbed his face with both hands, his fingers scraping against rough stubble. His reflection in the darkened window looked hollow, eyes sunken and skin pale beneath the harsh office lights.
Useless. It is all useless garbage.
He pushed himself up from the chair and began to pace across the office, moving like a restless animal trapped in a cage of wealth. He poured himself another coffee, the bitter smell filling the room, his hands moving on autopilot. Sleep felt like a myth, something other people enjoyed, never him.
Why cannot I shut my brain off, just for 1 hour?
As the storm continued outside, a new sound slipped into the room, soft and almost fragile. It drifted through the hall, threading its way through the mechanical hum. It was a human voice reading aloud, gentle and unhurried, completely out of place at this hour.
Who is there? Security.
Alert now, Alistair moved into the hallway. With every step, the voice grew clearer, guiding him toward the archives room, a place rarely visited at night. The door to the archives stood slightly ajar. Inside, shelves towered with old volumes and carefully cataloged collections. Amid the dust and paper, a single figure stood reading, unaware she was no longer alone. She walks in beauty, like the night, of cloudless climes and starry skies. Alistair leaned against the doorframe and listened. For the first time that night, the tension in his shoulders eased.
Byron, a bit cliché for 3 a.m, is it not?
Nova, startled. The book slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a dull thud. She turned to face him, her breath caught and her heart racing. Mr. Graves, I am so sorry. I thought everyone had gone home. I was just organizing the poetry section. Alistair stepped fully into the room and studied her with an intensity that made the air feel heavier.
It is 3:15 in the morning. Why are you organizing poetry?
Nova swallowed and clutched the book to her chest as the rain rattled the windows behind her. I missed the last train. I did not have money for a cab, so I thought I would work until morning. Please do not fire me. Alistair took a step closer. Something about her voice vibrated through his skull, tuned exactly to the chaos in his mind.
Your voice, it has a frequency. Read it again.
Confusion flickered across Nova's face, and her grip tightened on the book. What?
The poem. Read it again. Do not stop.
She hesitated, then opened the book once more, her voice steadying as the rhythm carried her forward. And all that is best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes. Alistair closed his eyes and released a long, slow breath as his shoulders finally dropped.
Keep going.
Encouraged, Nova continued, the words filling the room and pushing back the storm and the noise, thus mellowed to that tender light which heaven to gaudy day denies. Alistair moved back to his chair and sat down heavily, his breathing slowing to match her cadence.
Strange. The static in my head stopped. For the first time in 10 years.
Nova lowered the book, concern replacing her fear. Mr. Graves, are you okay? Alistair opened his eyes, exhausted, but burning with sudden clarity.
What is your name?
Nova. He repeated it silently, then spoke it aloud as if confirming a truth.
Nova, like a star, come with me.
Her pulse jumped. Where? He stood and turned toward the door, certainty in his movements, despite his exhaustion.
To my office. I have a sofa. I want you to read until I fall asleep.
The CEO's office felt sealed off from the rest of the city, a glass and steel sanctuary perched high above the streets. Rain battered the wide windows with relentless force, each drop striking like a fingertip demanding entry. The sound was louder here, amplified by height and isolation, until it blurred into a constant roar. Beneath it, the gas fireplace hissed softly, a controlled artificial flame that breathed warmth into the room without ever truly crackling. Leather, paper, and expensive wood absorbed the noise, turning the office into a cocoon where time seemed slowed, suspended between thunder and firelight. Sir, this is weird. If HR finds out... Tinto trying to be on my understand. Nova stood near the desk, shoulders slightly hunched, fingers curling and uncurling at her sides. The authority of the room pressed in on her, from the framed accolades to the minimalist furniture chosen to signal power rather than comfort. Her voice sounded smaller than she intended, nearly swallowed by the rain. Every instinct told her this crossed a line she did not have language for, a line drawn not in policy manuals, but in unease.
I own HR. I own the building.
Alistair moved with the practiced economy of a man accustomed to control. He slipped out of his suit jacket and draped it over a chair, then loosened his tie with a tug that suggested long familiarity with exhaustion. The gestures were deliberate, almost ceremonial, as if shedding armor at the end of a war no one else could see. The firelight caught the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, evidence of nights spent awake.
I am not asking for sex, Nova. I am too tired for sex. I am asking for a story.
He gestured toward the seating area, the leather sofa positioned to face the fireplace. His voice lacked its usual sharp edge and instead carried the flat honesty of someone past the point of pretense. Fatigue clung to him like a second skin, heavier than his tailored clothes, heavier than the rain outside.
Here, sit in the chair. I will lie on the sofa.
The chair he indicated was simple, almost modest compared to the rest of the room. Alistair lowered himself onto the sofa with care, stretching out as if testing whether rest was even possible. The fire reflected in his eyes for a brief moment before he looked away, surrendering his usual vigilance.
Here is a book, Pride and Prejudice. Boring enough to induce sleep. Read.
He placed the book in her hands, its worn spine a quiet contradiction to the sleek modernity around them. The choice felt intentional, something familiar, predictable, and safe. Nova felt the unexpected weight of responsibility settle into her palms, as if the pages themselves carried more than printed words. You really just want me to read? Nova eased into the chair, the leather cool against her back. She glanced at him, searching for irony or some hidden test. Instead, she found only a man lying still, staring up at the ceiling as though it might finally offer rest.
I want you to save my life. My doctor says if I do not sleep, I will have a stroke before I am 55. You are my medication. Start chapter 1.
The words landed with unexpected gravity. This was not seduction or command, but confession. Alistair closed his eyes, hands folding loosely over his chest, choosing trust over control. The rain softened, or perhaps Nova simply noticed it less. Nova opened the book and began to read aloud. Her voice emerged quietly at first, then settled into a gentle rhythm, each sentence flowing into the next. The language of another century filled the room, smoothing its sharp edges. As minutes passed, Alistair's breathing deepened into a slow, steady cadence. Tension drained from his frame, replaced by the vulnerable stillness of sleep. 5 minutes later, a soft snore escaped him, barely louder than the fire's hiss. Mr. Graves? She leaned forward slightly and lowered her voice. The The rain answered instead, steady and indifferent. Alistair did not stir. His face, unguarded in sleep, looked younger and gentler, stripped of intimidation. The power that defined him during waking hours seemed to dissolve, leaving only quiet humanity behind. He is asleep. He looks so peaceful, not scary at all. Carefully, Nova rose from the chair. She took a blanket from the back of the sofa and unfolded it with slow precision, draping it over him as if afraid the slightest mistake might wake him. The gesture felt intimate but innocent, an act of simple kindness. She paused once more, committing the sight to memory, then tiptoed out of the office. The door closed softly behind her, leaving Alistair alone with the rain, the fire, and his first real sleep in weeks. Morning arrived not as a gentle suggestion, but as a full-bodied presence that poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse. Sunlight stretched across polished stone and dark wood, warming the air with a quiet insistence. Far below, the city was already alive as traffic murmured like a distant river, horns occasionally rising and falling, and birds cut through the noise with sharp, confident calls. The height softened everything, turning chaos into atmosphere and wrapping the room in a deceptive calm that felt insulated from the world's demands. In the center of it all, Alistair Graves stirred. His body shifted against the sheets, breath drawing in slowly and deeply as if testing the air. That inhale was different, fuller and steadier than usual. His chest rose and fell with unfamiliar ease, and in the space between one breath and the next, awareness crept in. Not the usual crushing weight of exhaustion, but clarity. Rest. Real rest.
My God, I slept for 6 hours.
The words left him rough at first, shaped by disbelief more than sound. His voice, still low and gravel-edged from sleep, carried a note of awe. 6 uninterrupted hours was unheard of, a luxury his body had long forgotten how to claim. His mind, usually already racing by the time his eyes opened, remained strangely quiet, as if stunned into stillness by the fact that it had been allowed to stop. "Mr. Graves, you missed your 8 a.m. meeting. Are you all right?" The intercom crackled to life, the professional concern on the other end piercing the fragile calm of the room. Somewhere, many floors below, schedules were unraveling, assistants scrambling, calendars bleeding red. The world had noticed his absence. It always did. Alistair reached for the intercom with an unhurried motion. There was no panic in him, no irritation, only a cool decisiveness. His posture straightened as he sat up, the lingering warmth of sleep still clinging to his shoulders like armor.
Cancel everything until noon and find the intern, Nova. Bring her to me immediately.
The order landed with absolute certainty. This was not impulse. It was conclusion. Somewhere in the quiet corridors of his mind, a connection had already been drawn, a cause identified. Sleep was not an accident. It had a name. Moments later, the sound of the door opening cut through the room. The soft click echoed louder than it should have, followed by hesitant footsteps. Nova entered like someone stepping onto unstable ground, her posture stiff, eyes wide, shoulders pulled inward, as if bracing for impact. Fear clung to her as she hovered just inside the doorway, unsure whether to move forward or retreat. "Sir, did I do something wrong? Did I drool on the chair?" Her attempt at humor was thin, fraying at the edges. She searched his face for clues, for anger, for disappointment, anything she could prepare herself against. Interns did not get summoned to penthouses. Not like this. Alistair rose to his full height, the motion smooth and deliberate. He looked transformed, eyes clear, spine straight, the fatigue that usually haunted his movements nowhere to be found. Power radiated from him not as aggression, but as control sharpened by rest.
You did everything right. Pack your things. You are no longer an archivist.
The words hit Nova like a physical blow. Her breath caught, her mind scrambling to reconcile praise with dismissal. The corporate world had taught her that reassurance often came just before the fall. "I am fired?" The question slipped out small and fragile, carrying with it rent payments, student loans, and every quiet fear she had never said out loud.
You are promoted. Title, executive assistant. Duties, you stay by my side all day, and at night you read to me. Salary, triple your current rate, plus a housing allowance.
Each sentence rewrote her reality in real time. Promotion, title, money. Then that pause, heavy and deliberate, before the final condition: reading at night. The pieces did not quite fit together, and yet the offer loomed too large to ignore. "You want me to move in?" Disbelief colored her voice, the fear shifting shape into something more complex. Opportunity tangled with uncertainty, ambition with instinctive caution.
It is inefficient for you to commute. I have a penthouse upstairs. You will have your own room, but at night you work for me. Do you accept?
His tone was calm, almost clinical, as if discussing logistics rather than a life-altering decision. To him, this was optimization of time, of energy, of sleep. To her, it was a door opening into unknown territory. "Mr. Graves, people will talk." She voiced the unspoken concern, the shadow that followed power and proximity. Reputation, rumors, the cost that never appeared on contracts.
Let them talk. They are awake. I want to sleep. Do we have a deal, Nova?
There it was, the truth laid bare. Not desire, not scandal, need. A man who had found rest for the first time in years and was unwilling to lose it. Deal. The word settled into the room, quiet but irrevocable. In that moment, the balance between them shifted, the future narrowing and expanding all at once. Above the waking city, a pact was sealed, not in secrecy, but in the open light of morning. The penthouse breathed with a near, imperceptible hush. The kind of silence that only existed several dozen floors above a city that never truly slept. Glass walls framed the night like a cold, modern museum exhibit, distant constellations of traffic lights below, and a faint glow of skyscrapers puncturing the darkness. The air carried the subtle chill of climate control, precise and impersonal, wrapping the space in a quiet sterility that made every sound feel amplified and every movement deliberate. Night pressed gently against the windows, vast and watchful.
Tonight we try something different. The sofa gave me a backache. We will use the bed.
His voice cut through the stillness with measured calm, as if this were not a suggestion, but a logistical adjustment. Alistair stood with the composure of a man accustomed to control, his tone devoid of embarrassment or implication. The words landed plainly, yet the intimacy of them lingered in the air, reshaping the room's geometry. What had once felt like neutral space suddenly tilted, redefined by the gravity of what he proposed. "The bed? Your bed?" Heat rushed to Nova's face before she could stop it, a reflexive bloom of color betraying her thoughts. She stood frozen for half a heartbeat, fingers curling against the hem of her borrowed clothes. The question slipped out softer than she intended, threaded with disbelief and a flutter of nerves. The penthouse, moments ago cavernous, now felt impossibly intimate.
It is a king size, California king. There is acres of space. You stay on the left. I stay on the right. Here are your pajamas. Silk, high thread count. Go change.
He approached with pragmatic efficiency, already holding neatly folded pajamas, as though the decision had been made hours ago. The silk caught the ambient light, smooth and luxurious, beneath her fingertips when she accepted them. His instructions were precise, almost architectural, mapping invisible boundaries across the bed before either of them lay in it. There was no flirtation in his delivery, only certainty and an unspoken assumption that she would trust him. Time dissolved quietly as Nova changed, the night advancing in a soft blur. When she returned, the bed waited like an untouched landscape, sheets pristine and pillows aligned with obsessive care. The faint sound of fabric shifting echoed as they settled in, the rustle of sheets whispering secrets into the dark. Each movement felt magnified and slow, as if the room itself were paying attention.
Turn off the light, just the bedside lamp.
The overhead lights surrendered with a muted click, plunging the room into a gentler darkness. Only the bedside lamp remained, casting a warm amber halo that softened the sharp modern lines of the penthouse. Shadows pooled in corners, and the bed became an island of light in a sea of night, cocooned from the world below. "What do you want me to read tonight?" Nova sat upright against the pillows, a book resting uncertainly in her hands. Reading had become their ritual, her voice a steady thread that anchored the evenings. She waited now, fingers marking her place automatically, eyes flicking toward him as she searched his face for cues. The question carried familiarity, but also a subtle hesitation, as though she sensed tonight was already deviating from routine.
No book tonight, just talk to me. Tell me about your day, your life. I want to hear your natural cadence.
He lay back, staring into the dim glow, lids heavy but not yet closed. The pause before his request betrayed something fragile beneath his composed exterior, a desire not for performance, but presence. In asking for her unfiltered voice, he was surrendering control in the smallest, most telling way, inviting the unpredictable rhythm of her thoughts into his carefully ordered world. My day? It was crazy. I moved into a billionaire's penthouse. I used to live in a shoebox. I have a cat named Gatsby. I like strawberry ice cream. Her words spilled out in a tumble, mundane and miraculous all at once. Each sentence painted a contrast between who she had been and where she now lay, tracing the improbable arc of her life. As she spoke, the tension in her shoulders eased, her voice finding a natural rhythm. Warm, slightly breathless, alive with small truths that required no embellishment.
Gatsby, a literary cat. Keep talking. Tell me about the stars. You're named after one.
His eyes had slipped closed, but a faint smile curved his mouth, fleeting and genuine. The name amused him and anchored him. He listened the way one listens on the edge of sleep, deeply and without judgment, letting her words wash over him. The request about the stars felt almost tender, as if he were reaching for something vast and distant through her. Well, a nova isn't just a star. It's an explosion. It's when a star gets too bright and bursts. She hesitated before answering, gaze drifting toward the window where the real stars hid behind glass and city glow. Her explanation was careful and thoughtful, as though she were revealing a secret about herself under the guise of astronomy. The idea of sudden brilliance, of burning too intensely to remain contained, lingered in the space between them.
Like you are bursting with life, and I am a black hole. Absorbing you. Give me your hand.
Sleep tugged at his voice, softening its edges, but the metaphor landed with quiet force. In the dark, his arm lifted, searching without sight, fingers open and uncertain. The gesture was instinctive and unguarded, a rare moment where his usual precision gave way to need. His hand hovered, waiting, an unspoken question. Why? Her response was barely above a whisper, curiosity braided with vulnerability. She watched his outstretched hand, aware of the significance packed into such a simple request. The room seemed to hold its breath, the bedside lamp casting long shadows across the sheets as seconds stretched thin.
Grounding, I need to know you are there. Good night, Nova.
When their hands met, his fingers closed loosely around hers, warm and heavy with the pull of sleep. The grip was not possessive, but anchoring, as though her presence tethered him to consciousness. Almost immediately, his breathing deepened, evening out into the steady rhythm of rest. Nova remained awake, eyes fixed on their joined hands, feeling the quiet weight of being needed as the night settled fully around them. The middle of the night lay heavy over the penthouse, thick and breathless. The city below reduced to a distant constellation of lights. Inside the darkened bedroom, time seemed suspended. The sheets twisted and whispered as Alistair tossed and turned, his body fighting an unseen battle. Each movement was sharp and restless, as though he were trying to outrun something that clung to him even in sleep. His breath hitched, shallow and uneven and low. Broken sounds slipped from his throat, weighted with pain and fear that had no clear shape but immense force.
No, stop the numbers. It is all gone.
The words spilled out of him in fragments, dragged up from the depths of a nightmare that refused to loosen its grip. Spreadsheets, red ink, blinking cursors, and the suffocating silence of empty rooms collided in his mind. His face tightened, muscles pulling as if bracing for impact, sweat gathering along his brow. Each moan was not loud, but it carried the rawness of someone reliving loss as if it were happening again, right now, with no warning and no mercy. Alistair, wake up! Nova stirred beside him, the remnants of sleep dissolving instantly into alarm. She pushed herself upright, hair falling loose around her shoulders, eyes adjusting to the darkness as she reached for him. Her voice cut through the room, urgent yet anchored by care, trying to reach him across the distance that nightmares create. She leaned closer, searching his face for recognition, for any sign that he could hear her. He jolted awake with a sharp gasp, as though yanked back into his body. Alistair shot upright, chest heaving, lungs working too fast, too hard. Sweat clung to his skin, the sheets damp beneath his hands as he pressed his palms down, grounding himself in the bed. His eyes darted wildly, struggling to distinguish shadow from threat, present from past, as the last echoes of the dream shattered inside his head. It was just a dream. You are safe. You are in the penthouse. Nova steadied her voice, keeping it low and even, a verbal anchor meant to pull him back. She reached out, but stopped just short, letting her words arrive first. The familiar luxury of the penthouse stood in stark contrast to the devastation still flickering in his eyes. She wanted him to see where he was, to feel the present replacing the past.
It was the bankruptcy from 2008. I lost everything. My wife left. The lights went out. I cannot go back to the dark.
His hands trembled as he spoke, fingers curling inward as if trying to hold on to something solid. The memory poured out, unchecked, from collapsing numbers to rooms stripped bare and love giving way to absence. Darkness, to him, was not merely the absence of light, but a suffocating void where hope had once lived. You are not in the dark. Nova shifted closer, her movement deliberate and calm, as though slow motion itself might soothe him. See, light. She reached for the lamp and turned it on. Warm light spilled across the room, chasing shadows into the corners and revealing familiar shapes. The glow softened the sharp lines of Alistair's fear, reflecting in his eyes as proof that this moment was different. I have got you. She closed the remaining distance and wrapped her arms around him, firm but gentle. Her embrace was steady and grounding, offering contact without demand. It was the kind of touch that said she was here to stay.
Nova, do not. I am sweating. I am a mess.
He stiffened at first, self-conscious even in his unraveling. Vulnerability felt dangerous, and the instinct to pull away warred with the need to be held. I do not care. Lean on me. Nova lifted her hand to his hair, fingers threading through it in slow, soothing strokes. Each motion was unhurried and intentional, a quiet promise of patience and care. Shh, just breathe. Her whisper was close to his ear, timed with her own steady breathing. Gradually, his breaths began to slow, though they still shook as they left him.
You smell like vanilla. It drowns out the smell of fear. Do not let go.
He finally collapsed into her arms, the last of his resistance giving way. His forehead rested against her shoulder as his body allowed itself to be supported. "I will not. Lay your head on my lap. I will read poetry." She guided him carefully until his head rested against her lap. Her hand remained in his hair, continuing its slow, reassuring pattern. The room felt smaller and safer.
No poetry, just hum. Can you hum?
His voice was softer now, exhaustion threading through the words as fear loosened its grip. Nova began to hum, a wordless lullaby that rose and fell like gentle waves. Gradually, the tension drained from Alistair's body and his breathing evened out. Sleep reclaimed him as he remained there, head on her lap, held in light, sound, and quiet devotion as the night moved on. Daylight filtered through the tall front windows of the rare bookstore, softened by decades of dust and the faint yellowing of the glass. The air was thick with the scent of old paper, leather bindings, and time itself, an aroma that seemed to cling to the lungs and slow every breath. Shelves rose like quiet sentinels on either side, packed tightly with volumes that had survived wars, hands, and eras. The store was hushed, not silent, but reverent, as if every book demanded to be heard only in whispers.
Choose anything. First editions, signed copies, whatever you want.
Alistair's voice cut cleanly through the stillness, low and assured, as though money and rarity were concepts that had long ago lost their weight for him. He stood with casual ownership of the space, one hand resting against a shelf as if the books themselves were extensions of his world. His gaze was not on the price tags or the glass cases, but on Nova, watching, measuring, already deciding what indulgence would please him most. "Alistair, this book is $5,000. It's a signed wolf." Nova held the book with care, her fingers curved protectively around its spine, as though the number she had just spoken aloud might fracture it. The weight of the price seemed to settle in her chest, mixing with embarrassment and disbelief. She glanced between the book and him, her posture unconsciously stiffening, glasses slipping slightly down her nose as she tried to reconcile reverence for the object with the man who treated it so lightly.
Pocket change. You have given me 300 hours of sleep. By my hourly rate calculation, I owe you approximately $10 million. Buy the book.
He spoke as if reciting an obvious truth, a private arithmetic only he lived by. Money, in his mouth, became abstract, numbers without consequence. Yet beneath the flippancy was something precise, almost intimate. He remembered the hours, the cost of his rest, the debt he believed he carried to her. His insistence was not generosity alone. It was compulsion, a need to balance an invisible scale. "You treat everything like a transaction." The words escaped her before she could soften them. They hovered between them, fragile but sharp. Nova's shoulders drew inward slightly, as if bracing for dismissal, her reflection faintly mirrored in the glass of a nearby display case. Part of her resented the ease with which he erased value. Another part feared how much power he wielded when he did.
No, transactions end. I do not want this to end.
Alistair reached out and took the book from her hands, his fingers brushing hers for a fraction longer than necessary. The contact was brief but deliberate. He held the book loosely now, forgotten, as though its significance had already drained away. His tone shifted, no longer transactional, but confessional, revealing a quiet urgency beneath his control.
You are wearing your glasses today.
His eyes lifted to her face, attentive in a way that felt unnervingly intimate. He catalogued the small details others might overlook, the frames resting on her nose, the way they sharpened her expression, the barrier they created, and the invitation they implied. Time seemed to slow, the store receding until there was only the narrow space between them. "Oh yeah, contact lenses dry my eyes out." She answered too quickly, nerves betraying her. Her hand rose instinctively to adjust the glasses, a small, grounding gesture. She was suddenly acutely aware of how exposed she felt, seen not as an employee or a service, but as a person being studied, appreciated, and appraised in ways she had not prepared for.
You look intelligent, severe, I like it.
The words landed with unexpected weight. His approval was not playful, it was deliberate, edged with something darker. He stepped closer, close enough that Nova could sense his warmth, close enough that the narrow aisle seemed to close in around them, shelves pressing inward, like witnesses holding their breath.
It makes me want to mess you up.
His fingers lifted and touched the frame of her glasses, not removing them, just tracing their edge. The gesture was slow and intimate, a claim without force. Nova's pulse jumped, heat rushing to her face as the implication of his words settled deep, equal parts unsettling and intoxicating. "Sir?" The word slipped out on instinct, a fragile shield of professionalism. Her cheeks burned, breath shallow, mind racing to catch up with the sudden shift in gravity. She was pinned not by his body yet, but by his attention, by the way the air itself seemed to bend toward him.
Call me Alistair. I am awake now, Nova. I am fully rested. And a rested man has appetites.
He stepped closer, close enough that the bookshelf pressed cool and unyielding against her back. His presence was total and controlled, his voice dropping into something dangerously calm. Every word carried intention, the implication of restraint held tightly in check. He was not threatening, he was promising. Appetites for what? Her question was barely louder than a breath, curiosity threading through the fear. She did not move away. The world had narrowed to this moment, this choice to remain where she was, suspended between caution and desire.
For life, for beauty, for you.
The confession was unguarded, almost reverent. His hand lifted, and instead of claiming her mouth or her hands, he placed a gentle kiss against her forehead. It was restrained and deliberate, a promise deferred rather than taken.
But not yet. I need to be sure I am not dreaming.
He lingered for a moment longer, breath warm against her skin, before pulling back just enough to restore space. The bookstore returned slowly, the shelves, the dust, the waiting books, but the atmosphere had irrevocably shifted. Something had begun, unnamed and unfinished, suspended like a bookmark placed carefully between pages. The corporate boardroom felt less like a place of strategy and more like a sealed pressure chamber. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city, but the skyline offered no comfort, only a reminder of how high the stakes were and how far one could fall. Polished wood reflected the harsh white lights above, every surface immaculate, every chair occupied by men and women who measured their worth in percentages and quarterly returns. The air was thick with restrained hostility, the kind that never raised its voice until it was too late. Somewhere beneath the hum of climate control, tension vibrated like a live wire. At the far end of the table sat Mr. Kane, his posture rigid, his fingers steepled as though he were already passing judgment. He waited for the perfect moment to speak, letting silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. This was not curiosity driving him, but calculation, a belief that reputations could be eroded the same way markets were manipulated, slowly and in full view. When he finally opened his mouth, it was with the confidence of a man who assumed power would shield him from consequences.
Alistair, the rumors, the girl living in your penthouse, the intern. It looks bad. Investors are worried you have lost your focus. Is she a prostitute?
The words landed like a deliberate provocation, sharp and ugly, designed to linger in the room. A few board members shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting away, while others watched with thinly veiled interest. This was the kind of accusation that could not be unheard, the kind that poisoned the air simply by existing. For a fraction of a second, the room seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see whether Alistair would explode or unravel. Instead, the sound came first. A file struck the table with brutal force, the crack echoing off the walls like a gunshot. The polished surface shuddered under the impact, pens rattling and glasses trembling. It was not a loss of control. It was a declaration. Every eye snapped back to Alistair as if pulled by gravity.
Kane, you will retract that statement now.
Alistair's voice was low and unnervingly calm, stripped of all warmth. He did not raise it. He did not need to. The menace lay in the precision of his words, in the absolute certainty that he meant exactly what he said. His gaze locked onto Kane with predatory focus, the kind that promised consequences far worse than embarrassment. This was a man who had built empires and destroyed obstacles without ever breaking a sweat.
I am just saying.
Kane tried to retreat, but it was too late for that. His attempt at casual justification sounded hollow even to his own ears. The room had already chosen a side, and the balance of power had shifted so abruptly it was almost visible. Alistair did not interrupt him out of impatience, but out of certainty.
Nova is not a prostitute. She is my executive assistant. She is my wellness consultant. She has read more books in a week than you have in your entire miserable life. She is the reason I am standing here clear-headed instead of having a heart attack. If you disrespect her again, I will buy your shares at a discount and fire you into the sun. Am I clear?
Each sentence landed like a measured strike, calm but devastating. This was not merely a defense. It was a revelation. Alistair spoke of Nova with unshakable conviction, framing her not as a liability, but as a foundation. The threat that followed was not bluster. It was a promise backed by obscene wealth and absolute authority. No one at the table doubted that he could and would do exactly what he said.
Crystal clear, Alistair.
Kane's voice had lost its edge, reduced to compliance. His shoulders sagged just enough to betray defeat, and the smug certainty he had carried into the room evaporated. Around the table, silence reigned again, not with anticipation, but with fear. The hierarchy had been violently reaffirmed.
Meeting adjourned.
Alistair rose without another glance, the decision final. Chairs scraped softly as a few board members shifted, unsure whether to move or remain frozen. He walked out with long, unhurried strides, leaving behind a room full of people who suddenly remembered exactly why his name commanded respect. The door closed behind him with quiet authority. Outside in the corridor, the atmosphere changed. The harsh sterility of the boardroom gave way to softer light and open space. Nova stood there waiting, her expression composed but alert, as if she had felt the tension bleed through the walls. She did not need to ask what had happened to know it had been bad. I heard shouting. Alistair exhaled, the edge in him dulling the moment he saw her. The storm he had contained so ruthlessly inside the room dissipated, leaving behind fatigue and something far more vulnerable. His shoulders relaxed just a fraction, as if being near her allowed gravity to reclaim him.
Just taking out the trash. Let us go home. I need a nap, and I need you.
Paris pressed itself against the hotel windows like a living thing. Rain slid down the glass in long, silver trails, blurring the streetlights into soft halos that pulsed and faded with passing cars. Somewhere below, the city murmured as tires hissed over wet stone and distant voices dissolved into the night. The air inside the corridor carried a faint chill, the kind that seeped into the bones and made warmth feel precious and intimate. A sharp electronic chirp cut through the quiet as the keycard met the lock. The door yielded with a muted click, swinging open to reveal a room washed in amber lamplight. Shadows pooled in the corners, and the rain's reflection trembled across the ceiling like a restless thought. The space felt smaller than expected, closer, as if it were already conspiring to keep them near each other.
The hotel messed up the booking. One king bed, no sofa.
Alistair stood just inside the doorway, suitcase still in hand, taking in the single bed that dominated the room. Crisp white sheets lay untouched, too perfect and too inviting. His voice carried a note of restraint, but his posture betrayed him as if the room itself had shifted something loose inside his chest. We sleep in the same bed every night anyway, Alistair. Why is this different? Nova's smile arrived before she did, softening the edges of the room. She moved with easy familiarity, rain-damp air clinging to her clothes, eyes bright with an affectionate curiosity. The question lingered between them, inviting honesty rather than demanding an answer.
Because we are in Paris, and because I stopped taking the sleeping pills weeks ago. I have not needed them. But tonight I do not feel sleepy.
He set the suitcase down slowly, as if a sudden movement might break the fragile clarity that had taken hold of him. Paris hummed beyond the walls, and without the fog of medication, every sensation felt sharpened. Wakefulness wrapped around him, unfamiliar and electric. What do you feel? Nova's voice lowered with focus. She watched him the way one listens to music in the dark, attentive to the pauses as much as the notes. The room seemed to hold its breath as rain tapped a patient rhythm against the window.
Awake, alive, hungry. Nova, I am 53 years old. I should not be feeling like a teenager. But looking at you in this light, I do not want to sleep. I want to do everything else.
He crossed the space between them, each step deliberate, savoring the choice to move. His hand found her waist, warm and steady, and the contact sent a quiet jolt through them both. In the lamplight, he felt time fold in on itself, replaced by an unembarrassed wanting. Then do not sleep. Stay awake with me. Her answer was simple and unwavering. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming harder against the glass as though the city approved. The bed waited in the background while the room filled with charged silence. Their mouths met, not rushed, but certain. The kiss deepened with surprising urgency as breath mingled and the world narrowed to heat and closeness. The rain's rhythm became a pulse that echoed their own.
Are you sure? Once we start, I will not be able to stop. I will keep you awake all night.
The words brushed against her lips as much as her ears, a confession wrapped in caution. He searched her face for hesitation and found only resolve and a spark of challenge. The night stretched wide before them. I have coffee. Kiss me, Alistair. Morning light seeped into the room with a pale, almost apologetic quality, filtering through thin curtains and settling on the quiet apartment. The air was still, heavy with the faint scent of last night's warmth and the unspoken weight of decisions deferred too long. Alistair stood before the mirror as if it were a tribunal, the glass reflecting not just his face, but the accumulation of years behind it. Every line and shadow seemed sharper in this unforgiving light, exposing anxieties he carefully kept dormant in the dark. He leaned closer to the mirror, studying himself with an intensity that bordered on cruelty. The gray threading through his hair looked more numerous than he remembered, the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes deeper and etched by time and regret rather than laughter. His shoulders sagged slightly, not from physical exhaustion, but from the relentless pressure of self-reproach. The mirror did not lie, and today he was no longer able to look away.
Look at you. Gray hair, wrinkles. She is 22. She has her whole life. I am stealing her youth. I am using her as a crutch. What happens when I get sick? When I retire? She deserves better.
The thoughts spiraled, each one tightening around his chest like a coil. He imagined futures where he became a burden, where vibrant possibilities dimmed because of him. In his mind, Nova's laughter faded into obligation and her affection into duty. The fear was not of being alone, but of being the reason someone else lost the brightness of their youth. Guilt pooled in his stomach, heavy and undeniable, convincing him that love, in his hands, was indistinguishable from harm. Footsteps broke the silence, light, and energetic, carrying with them a shift in the room's atmosphere. The door opened, and Nova entered as if she were bringing the morning with her presence infusing the space with movement and warmth. The subtle rustle of a paper bag and the buttery aroma of fresh pastries followed her in, clashing sharply with the storm still raging inside Alistair. "Good morning. I ordered croissants." Alistair did not turn right away. When he finally did, his expression hardened into something deliberate and distant, as though he were putting on armor. His voice, when it came, was stripped of tenderness, each word chosen to wound before hesitation could soften them.
Pack your bags, Nova. We are going back to London. And when we get there, you are moving out.
The plate slipped from Nova's hands and clattered softly as it hit the floor, the sound startling in its fragility. Shock froze her in place, her joy evaporating in an instant and replaced by disbelief that spread across her face like a crack in glass. "What? Why? Last night was—" Alistair forced himself to continue, each sentence an act of self-punishment. He stood rigid, as though stillness might keep his resolve intact, refusing to meet her eyes for fear of what he might see reflected there.
Last night was a mistake. I crossed a line. I am your boss. You are my employee. I took advantage of your kindness. It ends now.
Nova's voice trembled, not with weakness, but with certainty born from intimacy. She stepped closer, searching his face for the man she knew, the one who had held her without distance. "You are lying? You love me. I felt it." The words struck him harder than accusation ever could. His composure fractured, and what emerged was a raw and desperate attempt to sever the bond by any means necessary. His voice rose, fueled by fear and a brutal sense of duty.
I'm doing you a favor. Go find someone your own age. Someone who does not need a bedtime story to function. I am a broken old man, Nova. Leave me alone.
Her breath hitched as the final words landed. Tears spilled freely, silent but devastating, as she turned away. The door slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing through the apartment like a verdict. In the aftermath, silence reclaimed the space, thick and suffocating, leaving Alistair alone with the consequences of his choice and the hollow reflection staring back at him. A full week had passed since the last fracture, and the London office had transformed into something closer to a mausoleum than a workplace. Night pressed its weight against the tall windows, the city outside reduced to distant sirens and blurred amber lights. Inside, the air was stale, recycled too many times, thick with the smell of cold coffee, sweat, and desperation. Time felt suspended, as if the clocks themselves were too tired to keep moving. Alistair sat alone at his desk, a pitiful figure hunched beneath the harsh glow of a desk lamp. His beard had grown in uneven patches, his skin dull and gray, his hands trembling as though the bones inside were no longer cooperating. Every movement cost him effort. Sleep deprivation clung to him like a fever, distorting his posture, hollowing his eyes, making him look decades older than he was.
Can't think, can't focus.
His fingers hovered over the keyboard, striking keys without rhythm or sense, letters piling up into meaningless strings. Thoughts slipped away the moment he reached for them, like smoke curling through open fingers. Concentration had become a foreign language, one he vaguely remembered speaking fluently in another lifetime.
4 days without sleep, the hallucinations are starting.
The admission felt less like a complaint and more like a clinical observation, detached and exhausted. His mind no longer obeyed him. Shadows stretched where they should not, bending into familiar outlines. The office corners seemed crowded with memories that breathed and watched him.
I see her in the shadows.
He swallowed hard, eyes flicking to the darkened glass of the window, half expecting to see her reflection standing behind him. Every flicker of movement sparked hope and terror in equal measure, his heart lurching each time it realized it had been fooled again.
I hear her voice.
The voice was gentle, persistent, threading itself through the static in his skull. It did not mock him. It soothed him. That was the cruelest part. Even now, even absent, she was mercy.
Alistair, sleep.
The words echoed with unbearable tenderness, collapsing his remaining resistance. His shoulders sagged, and the fight drained out of him all at once. He leaned forward until his forehead rested against the cool surface of the desk. The contact grounded him, just barely, the wood pressing back, as if to remind him he was still real, still here.
I was a fool.
Regret surged, hot and relentless. Pride replayed itself as a series of bad decisions, each one sharp enough to cut. He saw how easily he had dismissed the one thing that had ever truly kept him alive.
I pushed away the only medicine that worked.
Silence reclaimed the office, thick and oppressive, until it was shattered by a sudden sound. The phone rang, loud and intrusive, its vibration rattling against the desk like a demand. He ignored it, eyes closed, jaw clenched, as though refusing to acknowledge it might make it disappear. It rang again, more insistent this time, cutting through his fog. With a shaky breath, he grabbed the receiver, fingers numb.
What?
"Open the door, Alistair." Her voice was calm, sweet, impossibly real. Not a whisper in his head, not a memory. It landed solidly in his ear, sending a jolt through his spine.
Nova?
"I'm outside your office. Security let me in. They said you looked like a zombie. Open the door." He stood too quickly, the room tilting violently as blood rushed from his head. He stumbled across the carpet, one hand dragging along the wall for balance, each step uncertain. The door loomed ahead like a final test. When he opened it, the corridor light spilled in, and with it, her.
You came back.
The words broke out of him, fragile and disbelieving, as though saying them too loudly might shatter the moment. "You look awful." Her gaze swept over him, taking in every detail with brutal honesty and unmistakable concern.
I am dying. Without you, I'm just a ghost. I'm sorry. I was afraid. I felt old.
Confession poured out unchecked, years of carefully constructed authority reduced to a raw plea. "You are old, and you're stubborn, and you're mine. Now shut up and lie down on the sofa." She stepped inside and closed the door behind her, the click of the lock sounding final and safe. The world narrowed to the space she occupied.
Yes, ma'am.
He obeyed instantly, collapsing onto the sofa with a surrender that bordered on relief. "I brought a book, Wuthering Heights. Ready?" She sat beside him, her hand gentle as it threaded through his hair, slow and deliberate, grounding him more effectively than any drug.
Ready, Nova?
Tears slipped from the corners of his closed eyes, his body already yielding to the familiar safety of her presence. "Yes?"
Marry me. I can't spend another night without you. I will give you the publishing house. I will give you the moon. Just don't leave.
The plea was whispered, stripped of pride, heavy with terror at the thought of losing this again. "Sleep first. Ask me again in the morning, but the answer is yes." She opened the book and began to read, her voice steady and warm. The words wrapped around him like a lullaby. Almost immediately, his breathing slowed and deepened, his body finally surrendering to rest. For the first time in days, he was safe. "I used to think power was money or status. Now I know. Power is the ability to close your eyes and know that when you open them, she will still be there.